Hi everyone, it's lovely to talk to you today. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about open access and the various publication models that exist. So as a publishing model, open access refers to peer-reviewed full-text research articles that have been accepted for publication and are available to end users on demand without charge. However, the exact definition of open access remains very much open to debate, and there are a number of restrictions with regards to the reuse of content depending on the copyright license selected. Next slide, please. So at present, there are three core publishing models, subscription, hybrid, and full open access. And within the subscription model, readers subscribe to a journal or pay for access to individual publications. And upon acceptance of an article for publication, copyright is transferred from the author to the journal. And then journals then charge for pages and for color figures. Comparatively, under the open access model, the author or sponsor pays an article processing charge, or APC, to allow readers to access the article without charge on the publisher's website. The author or sponsor then retains the copyright, and the extent of this copyright depends on the copyright license selected. And then finally, hybrid open access is a very flexible model that allows researchers to select either the subscription or the open access model, depending on their needs. And then irrespective of the publication model selected, there's also the other key considerations for journal selection that include things like target audience, time from submission to publication, number of issues per year, capacity for data sharing, and things like publication enhancements and plain language summaries, as well as journal metrics of access, reach, and usage. Next slide, please. So at present, there are three main open access models, and these are gold, green, and bronze. Now, gold may be the one you're most familiar with. For gold open access, the published version of the article is made available on the publisher's website immediately after publication, and the author or sponsor pays an APC, typically in the range of $3,000 to $5,000, although this does vary by journal. Under this model, the author or sponsor retains copyright and selects a Creative Commons license based on their expectations for reuse. And we'll talk a little bit more about these licenses in more detail in a bit. For green open access, the accepted version of the article is placed by the author in a separate online repository, for example, PubMed Central. There may be an embargo period, for example, 6 to 12 months, but this isn't always the case. There is no cost for publishing green open access, but copyright is transferred to the journal via a copyright transfer agreement. Now, the term bronze open access was originally used by Purewire et al. In a 2018 study, meaning that an article was free to read on the publisher's webpage, but it didn't have a license to allow the content to be freely reused. And we've also got diamond open access, which is an emerging community-driven model. And in this model, journals and platforms don't charge fees to either the authors or the readers. Next slide, please. Now, under open access publishing models, authors pay an APC to retain copyright of their work under the terms of a particular Creative Commons license. And these licenses allow users to distribute, adapt, and build upon the material in any medium or format without needing to contact the author or the journal for permission, as is kind of the standard way with subscription journals. There are currently 6 types of Creative Commons licenses that can be applied to publish work, and these really determine how an author's content can be reused or reproduced. And these kind of diverge from the most permissive, which is CC BY, and this allows adaptation and commercial reuse of the content. But comparatively, CC BY, NC, and D, this is the least permissive license, and this completely prohibits adaptation and commercial reuse of the content. So it's important to really think about the Creative Commons license you select when you're publishing open access. And I'll now hand over to my colleague, Tim, who's going to take a quick look at recent trends in open access publishing.
Thanks very much, Amber. And we continue the whistle-stop tour by showing you what you're into here, which is a big global trend. Open access publishing is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. You could continue this graph further into history, and you could see that it was almost nothing. When I started in medical publishing, there was just 1 or 2 outliers, and now it's become a very standard accepted model. It's being pushed politically. There are lots of organizations such as Plan S. You will have heard things coming from the American government. And it is more and more of a thing. Those differences between types of open access we've been looking into. We, Open Pharma, very much enjoy our data and our evidence. So we're looking at other people's here, but we also provide our own. And that's necessary when you want to go comparing what's the difference between pharma and academic research. Won't go to this in detail, but just want to open up to say that we love going into this stuff into detail. And we have over several analyses, sometimes with clients involved as well, such as here at post-rituximab, and we're also working on live benchmarking. long story short is pharma has actually been catching up and to some degree overtaking academic research in terms of making medical research open access. So credit to you, credit to the industry for really stepping up. There are nuances within that and things that we can't take the time to talk about today, but actually would love to talk further in future. We've got the ability to go pretty deep with these sorts of metrics. We previously presented a kind of lineup here, which I won't go into too much, showing how companies' size and research output kind of correlates a bit with the proportion of open access. We can look at the way this maps year on year and how things grow. And it's just really interesting to see, as we discuss with companies, what their strategies are, what the output is, what companies' own analyses are based on your own records versus what the public analysis can see. But essentially, long story short, trends are up. And within those, we talk about how open things are. Amber touched on the licensing. So if you then go back to what are the Creative Commons licenses among top pharma, you can see that it's a spread. And the most open accepted license, CC BY, is just over a quarter, less than a third of articles published. And we'd like to look at that and maybe kind of push a little harder and see how far we can go in making content really reusable. Obviously, these other restrictions come into play. Everything's negotiation when you're talking with publishers. Of course, they're a business. And also with your academic collaborators and with your internal teams, you've got to work out what it's for. But it's just really interesting to see this number going gradually up, and we'd like to play our part in doing that. And we'll tell you a bit more about why that's really important. So starting at the beginning there, why is open access important? What's the point? What's the reason for you and for coming to this meeting? Short story from this graph is that paywalling, the inability to go and read the research, still affects about half of published medical research in the way that other people see it. So if you, without your Janssen login, want to go and look at some scientific research in a medical condition that you're interested in, you'll hit a paywall. You'll be clicking on your phone 50% of the time. You won't be able to see what you wanted to see. Personally, I find that extremely frustrating. And I would hope that people who want to engage with your content don't become frustrated. You can see that the degree of open access, in particular medical research, has been going up and up and up. You can also see the different types of open access. And if we were to do this graph showing pharma versus academic, you would see that pharma is driving a lot of the hybrid and gold growth and less of the green. And it's just really interesting to see that we can make a difference in this. And when I hand you back to Amber in a couple of slides' time, she'll talk about the why as to why that's really important. So when you've got your big pile of open access, you are now also looking about a big bill, but there is also a bill for not open access. So your library, you're paying a bigger subscription every year, as are the academic institutions. There are some schemes by which people in less well-off academic institutions pay less. There are some access routes for people around the world, but they're very unsatisfactory. Just to say that out loud, there is not good access to journal subscription material from places other than the very well-funded institutions and companies. And the affordability of access to information is getting more difficult. So just to balance that, because you will have heard about the cost of article processing charges, and obviously you have to pay to publish, subscription costs have been going through the roof as well. So what does it mean if you can't read the scientific material? Well, just going through all the points here would take a while, but one of the key things, as we saw particularly during the pandemic, is that if the first thing you see on the internet is the lower quality information, how are you supposed to know that? It was just the first Google hit, it was open, you could read it, fine. We would love to see a situation where the credible information, the evidence-based information is what you see, and that patients and families can access that and understand it as well as access it. Well, the same is true for academic researchers all around the world. Actually, as I said, the subscription cost going up means that access to information is getting rarer. It's a big assumption in our client companies that our HCP collaborators, your customers, have full access to journals, and that's just not the case. Do ask next time you're talking with some of your customers, could you see that paper before I gave it to you? It could also lead to duplicate research, to research not building on things that are already known. And then you may even get to a situation, and there's documented evidence of this, where people can make diagnostic and even therapeutic mistakes from having read only the short form. I'm thinking of one case in particular where an abstract was read, not the full paper, and a mistake was made, and it was a very sad instance. And then we're talking with the pharma companies about the full range of your interaction with publishing. That includes all the things you pay. It's not only at the point of paying an APC or a subscription, you are also paying for reuse of your own data at that symposium. If you put together a website, you have to pay a lot of money for the reuse of your own graph. And there's a way of sorting that out if we can all work together to look at it. So, ending on a positive note, I'm going to hand back over to Amber to talk about what's the benefits of open access.
Thanks, Tim. Yep, so next slide. Great, thank you. So yep, as Tim's mentioned briefly, the benefits of open access are quite far-reaching, and they do impact a diverse range of stakeholders. Broadly, open access publishing allows barrier-free access to scientific research, and this can have implications for patient agency and well-being, as well as research collaboration, education, and innovation. Open access publications also enable access to complete research evidence, encouraging transparency and reducing the risk of replication crises. Open access publications also tend to be more rapidly and broadly disseminated, and they have a greater impact on the research environment than non-open access publications, and I'm about to show you some data on that as well. But some of the main advantages include citation advantages and increased social media activity. However, some of the aspects of open access publishing benefit pharma exclusively, and most notably the use of Creative Commons licenses heralds potential long-term savings on journal subscriptions, page charges, figure permissions, and reprints, which often incur significant costs, particularly across departments. And depending on the license selected, content may also be easier to reuse with no permission required from the journal. Further, open access publishing allows broader knowledge and trust for all stakeholders in healthcare, and it can also bolster existing sustainability and social responsibility initiatives. Next slide, please. Importantly, open access is a financially sustainable publishing model. It's driven by competition demand and recently open access mandates from both federal and industry funders. So currently, fully open access journals are thriving, and many more publishers are transitioning traditional journals to the open access models. And in addition, a majority of publishers now offer APC waivers or discounts for authors in lower and middle income countries. In addition, transformative agreements have played a significant role in the shift to open access publishing at academic institutions. And for those who aren't aware, transformative agreements are contracts between institutions and publishers that facilitate a transition from the more subscription-based reading models towards read and publish open access models. And these agreements are kind of expected to provide more predictable revenue streams with less administration and better value for both institutions and publishers. And interestingly, as of this year, Open Pharma are actually exploring logistics of transformative agreements between publishers and pharma companies now. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes. Next slide, please. So these are some of the metrics I talked about earlier. Accumulating evidence now suggests that open access publishing enhances research impact. A recent white paper from Wiley, articles published in open access journals between 2015 and 2020 had more full text downloads and citations than those published in subscription-only journals. And articles published in fully open access journals had a 44% increase in citations compared with subscription articles. And this actually increased to 114% for hybrid open access articles. Next slide, please. And these advantages are consistent across hybrid journals, which publish both subscription and open access publications. In fact, in a report from Springer Nature, which focused on articles solely published in hybrid open access journals, open access articles had a 64% increase in citations and a 300% increase in article downloads compared with subscription-only articles. Next slide, please. Now, altmetric scores now show similar trends. These indicate the amount of attention an article receives outside of traditional metrics. So things like social media mentions, mentions in the news, and also in policy documents. And among articles published in hybrid journals, open access articles have demonstrated substantial benefits across the majority of altmetric domains, including a 140% increase in average attention score. Next slide, please. Similarly, open access journals demonstrate higher citation metrics. Analysis of the difference between open access and non-open access journals found significant differences in several journal citation metrics, including scholarly output, which reflects the total number of research outputs for a journal, site score, which is the yearly average number of citations for recent articles, percent cited, which reflects the percentage of articles with at least one citation, and SNP, or source normalized impact per paper, which is an indicator of contextual citation impact. Interestingly, while there are limited data on HCP interactions with open access publications, HCPs with full access to the clinical resource website up to date have viewed significantly more content than those with partial access. So we do see open access making a difference in many regards, or even if we don't have the exact data for it yet. So. Yeah. And I'll now hand back over to my colleague Joanna to go through the key takeaways. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber. So just to summarize what we talked about, we are a multi-sponsored collaboration and working with you to increase transparency and access to research outputs. Open access has various advantages. It provides direct access to research without charge for readers, so increases the impact of the research and makes it easier for everyone to benefit. So open access publishing has been increasing both for academic and pharma sponsored articles, and there are 2/3 of scientific publications from pharma now open access. And open access publishing is, as I mentioned, provides a vital source of information for people, particularly those who are not affiliated with institutions that pay subscriptions.